and the Rotary International. I want to once again thank you for having time to organize this event. Rotary will not be left in fostering peace and international understanding across the globe. We, as a district, have tried to put in extra effort to make sure that we have more candidates, especially from this part of the world, qualifying for the Rotary Peace scholarships. We want to congratulate the 4 Peace Fellows that just qualified. This has been the highest in the history of Rotary International District 0911. We are hoping that we will maintain this tempo and also surpass it. We are hoping that we'll be able to go ahead and never come below this number anymore. So we want to urge all our fellows that have qualified that they'll be good representative of Rotary and foster peace all around the world wherever we find ourselves. The district governor is unavoidably absent, but I'll reach him and make sure that he gives all necessary support to past, present, and future peace fellows. We want to thank you so much for what you're doing. We know you're putting a lot of sacrifices in ensuring that peace reigns around the world. So for me personally, I'm always available to give support in any area I'm called upon. I'm always available. I'll be part of this program until the end of different stages of the program. I want to especially thank our peace fellow Sonny Dada for all he has been doing, all the support, all the encouragement he has given to the district, even towards encouraging our participants that's qualified. I want to really thank him, and we hope that in no time he will come and fully join us in the full work of Rotary. So on behalf of the district governor, once again, I say thank you. Welcome to you all, and we hope that we have a wonderful section today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Amakri, for that very short and inspiring goodwill message from the Rotary Club of Port Harcourt District 9141. I'd like to call on Thomas Sitole for the goodwill message from Makerere University, Uganda. Thomas Sitole.
I think he's no longer here. I cannot see him again. Maybe network. I can't see him. I'm looking at the participant list. He's no longer there.
Okay. Okay, so should we move on to the next?
Yes, I think I will advise that we move on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next on our agenda. Okay. Next on our agenda is analysis of social cultural norms influencing cultism in communities, the experience sharing. This session will provide a summary overview of the challenge of cultism, drawing from local community experience and the basis for the social change initiative. This session will be taken by no other person than Mr. Hussein Usanga, the Rotary Peace Fellow. Hussein Usanga, can we have you, please?
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you. Sorry, I was disconnected for a while, but I am back. So I'm going to be talking about those social cultural norms that tend to encourage cultism in Nigeria. I hope you're hearing me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. So sorry, I just got back on my laptop. Let me disconnect from my phone now.
Hussein, can you mute one of your devices so that we won't have an interruption, please? Are you there, Hussein?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to be talking about social cultural norms that encourage cultism among young people in Nigeria, especially in our institutions, both secondary and tertiary institutions. I have worked over the years, specifically in the Niger Delta, on peace building programs, and in 5 of the 5 communities I worked in the past 2 years, we did a conflict analysis and cultism came up among the top 3 drivers of conflicts in those communities. I do not think it is different in most other places. So I will dwell on that. But before we start, I would like us to do a little introduction about what, so that we are on the same page on what we are talking about when we talk about secret calls. So that one. So the term secret cult is a controversial term, and its definition is relative to time and place, and also depends largely on who you are asking. So even experts have different views of what cultism really means. So, but I'm going to try to share 2 perspectives which people look at the word secret cult. And one is the theological or religious perspective, while the other one is sociological. So from the religious perspective, we have those ones are tied to maybe spiritual or you know, like okay, I can give example like Boko Haram. I can give example like if you're familiar with Okija Shrine, and also we have this Pastor King, I think in Lagos, that burnt his members, and then we also have the Guyana Triangle. So these are also cults in a manner of speaking. And then on the sociological ones, those ones are often euphemized as fraternity. Some people call it game, confraternity, family, system, brotherhood, runs, and so on. Those ones now are mostly gender specific. So it's either they are all male or all female, and they are characterized by extreme behaviors and beliefs. And then they also have this regimentation where they treat their members like the military, and they have secrecy, and then they are usually very hostile towards non-members and members of opposing cults. So for the purpose of this discussion, it is the latter one that we'll be talking about. Are we together?
Yeah, we're together.
Okay. So cultism in Nigerian schools have in Nigeria, especially starting from schools, came as a system where people who feel oppressed, especially students, the underprivileged, tend to come together to have a bigger voice to challenge inequalities in the system and in the society. So people chose to join secret cults as an expression of their displeasure and dissatisfaction with the prevailing social order and political arrangements in their environment. So these people resorted to this subculture of confraternity as a means of voicing their discontent, and also oppressive political economy and weak, corrupt social structure of their societies. So it is obvious now that it is the lower class people, especially students, who are frustrated and they believe that their rights have been alienated from them over time, that constituted most members of these cult groups. But that's not to say communities as members of cult groups, essential people in the military, lecturers, and so on, as part of cult groups. So now to the thing that drives cultism, the social norms that drive cultism. We know that in Africa generally, we have always had these secret groups. Like we have in Akwa Ibom, we have the Ekpo Society. So this is a society of just men who keep their secrets, and then they are somehow like the cult that we just talked about, except that these groups were not there to challenge the society. So they were rather there to act as like law enforcement, to strengthen the societal, the connection and the laws within the societies. So this is where that kind of notion that men coming together in secret you understand, is something that is acceptable to society. And I think this culture is also in other places where you have people come out in the night. Some groups are also made of females. Even in my place, we also have females. And then also, we also have this, the fact that people look for role models. And from my experience in the field, a lot of young people model themselves after their senior brothers, their senior cousins, and senior uncles who are mostly cultists, who are able to speak up in the society, people who are feared, people who are well connected. And that is the deception that lures these young people into cultism. So they tell them that, come, you see that that chairman is our member now, you know, you see these are members now, you come, you'll be protected, you'll be a big boy. And that on its own also really encourages a lot of young people to go into cultism. I remember when I was in secondary school, just about when I was in SS3, nearly half of my classmates already knew the calls that they'll be joining. So it became like a very core part of the social fabric that young men, when they get to that certain stage, they have to belong. They have to gather that influence. They have to be able to attract women. They have to be able to attract businesses and monies. And these are realities. Because like I had a discussion once with some young people. I had a focus group discussion with some young people in a community that was that cultism was really a big issue. And so while they were talking, they made me to understand that when you are cool-headed, most of these politicians don't want to take you as their godson, whom they are going to support and build and develop into a full-fledged politician. So most of the people that they pick are the people who are capable of violence, and most of them are cultists. And then if you also look at the amnesty program in the Niger Delta, it looked as if the program was rewarding young people who were violent. There were, I think Mr. Yahweh is here. We had that discussion when I worked in their community. A lot of young people who were not violent, they did not benefit from any of the packages that came to empower young people in the region. And they were always complaining, is it that we're not violent? That means that if there is another opportunity for violence, that means I will join so that when something comes out, I can benefit. And also looking deeply into this, you find out that all the violence that you see in terms of militancy, all the violence you see in terms of election violence, all of them stem from cultism. Different cult groups coordinate those attacks and those violent escapades. And then I think I've spoken somewhat around my experience about how this is cultism is being perpetrated, and some of the reasons why young people seem to be attracted to cultism. And no matter what we say, it's just like the issue that happened here in Lagos last week. The story goes that in a secondary school, kids that are like adolescents, within the ages of adolescence, try to initiate a fellow pupil in a cult. And when this boy resisted, he was beaten until he sustained injuries that led to his death. This is not an isolated case. And over the social media, you hear people talk. People say things like maybe the kids should be brought to book, but these are just kids. This is what the society, you understand, has made them become. These are kids, and it doesn't matter whether their parents are influential or not. I think that what matters is for all stakeholders to take a holistic look at what is driving this, to be able to nip it at the board. So playing the blame game and being one-sided in addressing cultism may not lead us to any kind of success. if we don't take a holistic approach in terms of creating, for instance, jobs and making jobs also be everybody have equal access to opportunities. Don't forget that the very first thing that I mentioned about what brought cultism is when people feel oppressed. When people feel oppressed, they come together and start this strong head. They start to defy the societal norms just to stand out. I have seen for myself once when it was a political meeting. I just finished school that time, and so we went for this political campaign, and they said it's a closed door meeting. If you don't have an invitation, you can't come in. And this thing happened in my ward, and so one of the boys there packed stones and started throwing stones into that building. Throwing stones. Do you know, they came out, opened the gate, and allowed him in, while the rest of us stood outside. So these are some of the practices that maybe knowingly or unknowingly, our systems are also, perpetuating to encourage the growth and expansion of cultism. So I would like to take a little break here, and maybe I'll still talk more, but in order not to bore us, let me just take a little break. And just so you know, my organization is having its 10th anniversary today, and I am a very core part of the event. But because this is also very important, I made sure that I make out time to be here. So if I take a break now, I'll be able to join again in the next 10 minutes. But I will wait to hear if there are some comments or questions around what I have said so far. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hussein, for that very brief and more deeper presentation, which x-rays the issues around cultism, particularly drawing from a local community experience. I want to appreciate you for this analysis. And if you have anyone who wants to make contributions to what Hussein has said, the floor is open for discussions around this. Do we have anyone? Can you all hear me? Contributions, observations from participants. Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah,
I can
yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Do you have anyone who wants to make contributions or observations in addition to what Rotary Peace Fellow Hussein?
Please, I think I don't know if Mr. Ayowe's microphone is on. I have also worked with him very extensively with community youths on this, and he is also a lecturer in a school, and I believe that he has some experience to share. So, Mr. Ayowe, is your mic on now? Or your mic is still not on? I don't know how I can help you to activate that. Can anyone please suggest how Mr. Ayowe can activate his microphone? It's not activated at all.
Hussein, thank you for bringing in that angle. Obviously, Ayowe has so much to say because I know that he played a very crucial role in the work that we did in his community in 2020, where we collaboratively ended cultism in Amasoma, and Ayowe, as the chairman of the local peace committee, local project committee, played a very, very key role. It will also be good to also drink from his experience, from the fountain of his knowledge, because he has been deeply involved in this process. He has not less than 10 years of active community engagement, in this work. So I hope that this microphone will allow him to talk. Hussein, thank you for that perspective. I will also add that if we don't have anything to say for now, maybe we can move on, because there is also another session for a plenary. So maybe during the plenary, all of us can come in and have the conversation together. I'm sure by then everybody would have maybe have a very good concept of what we're discussing, and they also prepare themselves to contribute accordingly. Thank you.
So, so I will step away for maybe 10 minutes, and then I'll be back, please.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
All right, Hussein, thank you very much. We are moving on to next on the agenda, which is linkage between cultism and structural youth violence in schools. We have a presentation. This session will provide a knowledge-based analysis of the various drivers of cultism in schools, linkage between cultism and structural violence in Nigeria. And we have this presentation by no other person than Rotary Peace Fellow Sonny Dada. Can we have you, please?
Thank you for having me. I also want to thank can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I also want to thank the last speaker for laying the foundation. He did very well, and he has made my work very easy. My session will basically look at beyond the norms, which Hussein has extensively talked about. Looking at my session will basically look at policy frameworks, linking cultism to some of the very challenging conflict attitudes or conflict behaviors we have seen in communities, and also link it to failure of policies and programs of governments. Then from there, we move to having recommendations. I have some recommendations to make, but at the end of the day, those recommendations shall also be subjected to plenary, where everybody will also make their own recommendations. The idea is that at the end of the day, all recommendations will be packaged, sent to Makerere University for input, and thereafter, we will begin to use these recommendations to engage policymakers. So what we are doing today is very, very important. So once again, I want to thank all of us for finding time to stop by. It shows that you are committed to peace building. What is happening in Nigeria today should be a concern to all of us. And the interesting thing is that policymakers are only looking at the fruits. They are not looking at the proximate or the latent factors that have brought us to where we are currently. So what this presentation wants to do is to take us back to the root. The root cause is the latent factors that has actually brought us to where we are. So once again, thank you for being part of it. The focus of my presentation is the linkage between cultism and structural youth violence. So I'm going to be presenting to you some of the tools we use in peace building, so that all of us will look at it together and analyze. I hope that this will be an interactive session, even though the time is very short. We deliberately did it that way so that understanding the season we are in, we know that people are very busy and all of that. So I just hope that the session will be interactive. Now, I don't know if everybody is seeing my screen. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, only the moderator is talking. I can't hear the others. But if you can see the screen, beautiful. Let's go ahead. What you are seeing right now is what we call conflict tree. Of course, in conflict analysis, we use several tools. We use conflict tree. We use the iceberg tool. We use the onion tool. But I've decided to use the conflict tree. The conflict tree is one of my best because it is very simple to understand, and even without a practitioner taking you through the conflict tree, mere looking at it, you can understand what the issues are. Now, look at this conflict tree. The conflict tree is basically divided into three parts. The first part is the root causes. The second part is the actual problem, while the last part is the effect. And that is how a tree is. When you see a tree with fruits, massive fruits, there is something that gives nutrients to that tree, which is the root that is buried in the ground. So every conflict challenge you see, there is a latent factor. There is a root cause for that conflict that are most times invisible to the eyes of people. What people see in conflict is a manifestation of conflict. They don't see, the root causes, the unseen things, the things that are not said, or mentioned. They don't see those things. Now, the challenge of cultism, if you look at this conflict, you see that there are a number of factors. As a matter of fact, all these factors you are seeing are not even exhaustive. There are many other factors, but for the purpose of this discussion, I just listed these ones. There is peer pressure, there is political corruption, there is incessant disruptions to academic calendars, conflict incentives, eroding social values, variant of ethnic militia, lack of inclusive development, poverty, unemployment, prevalence of entrepreneurial conflict role models, structural learning environment, and all of that. If you look at all these factors, you will realize that some of these factors happen within the school environment, while some of the factors are within the communities we live in. For instance, peer pressure. You have peer pressure both in school and even in communities. While Hussein was speaking, he cited the Dowen example. Many of us are aware of the Dowen example that happened recently, I think last week. Bullying and all of that led to the death of a 12-year-old boy and all of that. And over 100,000 have signed a petition. I also signed that petition that the perpetrators should be prosecuted and that the school authority should also be brought to book. I am one of those 100,000 people that signed that petition. So you have peer pressure within campuses, within school environment, within communities. Then political corruption. You and I know the challenges we have. We're going to talk more about political corruption when it comes to identifying the real causes, the real structural youth violence that I've identified. We're going to talk more about political corruption. Then the incessant disruption of academic calendar. We're also going to talk about that. It is part of the structural youth violence adding to cultism. Then conflict incentives. I'd like us to talk about conflict incentives. Hussein cited a very good example. When he mentioned that, I was laughing, where they were supposed to attend a political meeting and they were prevented from entering the hall. And all of a sudden, one of them, who is a known cultist, started causing trouble, stoning the organizers and all of that. And all of a sudden, they admitted him. They opened the door for him. While the others, Hussein and his gang, who are not cultists, were denied access to the meeting hall. So that is a conflict incentive. That is enough for a youth, an active youth, to say, okay, if that is the case, let me go and join what this man has joined so that I can also begin to benefit from all of this. He talked about politicians using stubborn boys and all of that, stubborn girls and all of that. They are all part of conflict incentives. He talked about the amnesty program. What Hussein did not mention is the fact that I know about 6 graduates who are not cultists, they have no link to cultism, who enrolled in that amnesty program. When they saw that only youths who have carried arms, cultists and all of that, ethnic militia, who have carried arms against the government, were provided for in that amnesty package, 6 graduates that I know enrolled in that program just to also benefit from the scholarship programs offered by the amnesty program, to benefit from the skill acquisition initiatives and all of that. They are all part of conflict incentives. Then eroding social values. You know that we have a value challenge right now. Our values are fast depreciating. We can't waste so much time to talk about that. Then the variant of ethnic militia. I listened to Alhaji Asari Dokubo in one of his interviews in the heydays of violence in Rivers State. I listened to his interview. Asari Dokubo used to be the chairman of IYC, president of IYC. And one of the things he mentioned in that interview is that he decided to transform IYC because he noticed that some cultists infiltrated, IYC and started operating under the umbrella of IYC. IYC is not a cult group. IYC is a socio-cultural group that advances the economic and the social, well-being of the Jaw people, But under that umbrella, some people who are cultists, took over the umbrella and, hid under the umbrella and started doing some things, which he said was also a genesis of the problem that he had with some persons and all of that. So the variant of ethnic militia, is also, if you're from the Niger Delta, of course, the challenges, how the movement, the transition from the conflict to amend, and all of that. These stories, so we shouldn't waste time on that. Then the lack of inclusive development. There has been so much talk about the lack of inclusive development, which has also led to lack of social cohesion generally in Nigeria and all of that. Then the quest for social identity. The university, a Jambite just gained admission. A Jambite just gained admission into the university, and he wants to belong and all of that. 2 weeks ago, a case was brought to my attention. There was this particular boy who is yet to even do his clearance. He has not even been fully admitted. He has not done his clearance, but yet he has joined one of the cult groups on campus, the quest for social identity. Then on structured learning environment, our university environment, it has a serious challenge in the sense that somebody who is not a student can conveniently mingle with the students, attend lectures, come to classes, and pretend to be a student undetected. We have so many of them, like that. We also have so many who have graduated from school, but you still see them on campus, still pretending to be students and all of that. So all of these are the challenges. Then entrepreneurial conflict role models. Susan talked about it, how people look up to certain persons who, as a result of their involvement in cultism, have risen to certain levels of prominence in society and all of that. Then the mother of all, poverty and unemployment. So this is just the background of, the general analysis of what the factors are. I provided a background that formed the basis of my presentation. And the background is as a result of field experience and even classroom, learning experience. Working in Niger Delta communities, doing, implementing peace building projects and the democratic governance projects. There is always the opportunity to interact with people through focus group discussions, through key informant interviews, and even through IDI, in-depth interviews and all of that. So from there, you get to know, so much about these challenges, because a lot of these projects are focused on youths, are focused on community well-being. And if it is focused on community well-being, naturally, you must work with marginalized groups such as women, youth, people with disabilities. And working with marginalized groups, you get to know most of these things, get to know most of this information. Now, I'm going to show us the environment of cultism on campus and how cultism has moved to the streets, not just moving to the streets, and how these cult groups have also transformed, into street cults and all of that. This is the traditional cultism landscape that we used to know in Nigerian schools. You have the Buccaneers, the Pirates Confraternity, the Black Bra Confraternity, which is for women. You have the Daughters of Jezebel, which is also for women, the Baggers, the Black Ass, Klansmen, Vikings, and all of that. And those of you who have gone through the four walls of the university, these things are not new to, these names are not new to you. But this is the traditional cultism landscape that we used to know in schools. But over time, we have seen these groups, moved into the streets, moving into the streets, not necessarily bearing the names that they used to bear on campus, but now transforming into different other, groups. Some of the groups are now affiliates. Some of the groups are now regarded as military wings. Some of the groups are now regarded as political wings, such as the Debams, the Daywell. I listed them here under my background: the Icelanders, Beresako, the Outlaws, the Greenlanders, and all of them. It will interest you to note that from some of my interviews, my key informant interviews, it will interest you to know that these street cult groups are almost the same with the campus cult groups. They only act as wings. They only act as wings, because some of the campus cult groups, you can't join them if you are not a student. So the number one requirement to join them is that you must have an admission status. You must be a student. But however, the street cult groups, you don't need that admission requirement, that student requirement. The number one requirement is that you are head-hearted, you can stab, you can shoot, you can do all manner of things and all of that. In a particular community in Bayelsa State, I had an in-depth interview with a very important general, as they call themselves. They also have generals, colonels. It's like a military formation, So I had an in-depth interview with him, and yeah, he also revealed to me that, look, yes, cultism, like Hussein established, is supposed to provide security for their members, look out for the well-being of their members and all of that. But he admitted that that objective has also been expanded to include things like kidnapping, things like robbery and all of that, even though he refused to admit that he has engaged in any of those things. However, he categorically told me that some of his colleagues that he knows very well are into, those things, kidnapping and, all of that. And he also told me how they are linked to campus called groups, and all of that. And this is the benefit of, field experience. And that is why it's important that as parents, as professionals, practitioners working in the development sector, who are working assiduously, contributing to ensure that we strengthen the social fabric of our country, it's important that we take note of all of these things so that when we come up with our intervention plans, when we come up with proposals for projects and all that, we'll be properly guided and understand that our society is sinking. If you look at the conflict profile of our country, it's something that should worry you. In the Northeast, there is the terrorism conflict challenge. In the North Central, there is the banditry challenge. In the Northwest, still banditry, kidnapping, and all of that, which has become an industry. Now, that has also crept into the Southwest. All of these are economical and, religious, also have a religious variant in them. Then if you come to the Southeast, you have the separatist, conflict challenge, MASOB, IPOB, ESN, that is Eastern Security Network, unknown gunmen, as we have, jokingly call them, discard and all of that. Then if you come to the South South where we are, the biggest conflict driver, cultism, which Hussein also, corroborated, in his presentation, cultism. Then from there, you now have the nexus, of kidnapping and all of that. So you see that cultism, share a nexus with 98% of the crimes we see in our society today. So what I did, I decided to do a power mapping. I decided to map the cultism landscape, and their relational lines. Now, look at this map you see. You have the rival cult groups on one side. Directly opposite them, you have the politicians. Under them, you have the security agencies, you have the youths. Then you have the IOCs, NGOs, vigilante, elders, militants, and traditional rulers. Now, please, there is a clear line between a militant and a cultist, even though the line keeps, being blurred every day. The line is difficult to trace every day, but there's a clear line. We have people who genuinely fought, for the well-being of their regions, who are still fighting for the well-being of their communities. Then we have people who decided, to cash in, to take advantage of this fight for militancy, separatist movements and all of that. But, they are cultists, and they decided to cash in, into this movement to cover up, their activities and actions. So this is the general landscape. But now let's go into the details of the relational lines. Let's go into the detail of the relational lines. I'm going to explain the lines you see. There is a slide on it, but I'll just do a summary. I'm not sure if our time can take it. Now, look at it. We have cultists, then we have broken lines, interrupted lines, straight lines. We have cultists, we have youth violence, we have youth, government, security agencies, politicians. Of course, these are the stakeholders when you discuss these challenges. Let me explain the lines, the essence of the lines, so that you have a better understanding of how this relationship occurs. Any group that you see two lines linking, for instance, you see youths have two lines linking to cultists. The two lines symbolize alliance, not just a relationship. It is beyond an ordinary relationship. There is an alliance. Any line you see that is just a single line talks about relationship. Then when you see a single line with two lines in the middle, that's an interrupted line. That is a broken relationship or a blocked relationship. Then the zigzag lines, of course, explains a conflict relationship. So now let's look at it now. Between youth and cultists, you are seeing two lines, isn't it? That's to say that there is a very strong alliance between youth. Of course, who are the cultists? Are they not youth? They are the youth. So there is a strong alliance between youth and cultism. Now, from cultists to youth violence, you also have two lines, also showing a very, very strong alliance, very, very strong alliance. However, if you come back to youth, you see that there is a single line from youth to youth violence. That takes care of the other group I earlier explained, the militants, who are not necessarily people that are out to cause havoc and all of that. They are people who are fighting for the well-being of their people. They are not necessarily engaging in violent conflict because it is a venture, no. If you see them engage in violent conflict, it is because they want to attract attention of governments, not necessarily for personal problems. That's a conversation that we can have, another day. Then under the youth directly, you have politicians. You see that between politicians to youth, you have also two very solid lines. Alliance. Of course, politicians can't win election without youths. In fact, the marginalized groups in this country have the highest voting population. Politicians know this, and that is why they woo youth a lot, they woo women a lot, during elections. So politicians have a very, and when you talk about ballot box snatching and all of that, who do they use? Do they use old men? It is youth. They have a very strong alliance with the youth. Then from the same politicians, you also see two arrows linking to youth violence, also showing that, yes, the politicians also promote youth violence. From the same politicians, you're also seeing two strong arrows linking to cultists, the same alliance. Then between youth and government, you are seeing a single line. In that single line, you are seeing two lines in the middle. That is a broken relationship. Of course, you know the disenchantment the youths of this country have against the government, whether at state level, whether at council level, whether at federal level. The NSAS protest is a perfect example of the disenchantment of youth against institutions in this country. And that is why you see that their relationship to government is interrupted, as shown with those two lines that crossed the single line linking youth to government. Then security agencies to government, of course, that's a strong relationship. Then government to youth violence. I am not saying there is an alliance, but I have an evidence that there is a relationship between government and youth violence. I have a strong evidence, but my evidence does not show that there is an alliance. But why did I say there is a relationship between government and youth violence? Because a lot of the structural factors that have led to youth violence are structures that government is supposed to handle. But government is not handling these structural factors. And because of the failure of governance, these structural factors have led to youth violence. So with that, there is a relationship. Government to cultists, there is also a relationship, but I can't say there is an alliance. Why did I say there is a relationship? Because we have also seen over time that, over time, some positions of government have been used to, even contracts have been given to cultists to pacify them and all of that. So there is a relationship. Now, I am seeing that something is missing. There is also supposed to be a line between youth and security agents. But I didn't put it's an oversight. There's supposed to be a line from youth to security agents, but that line will be similar to the line you have between youth and government. Interrupted relationship, because youths don't trust security agencies. They are not with security agencies. In fact, we shouldn't even talk about the controversial Lekki massacre and all of that, which has led to Lagos State government issuing a white paper, which in SBC being debated whether there was a massacre or not. But whether there was a massacre or not, the NSAS report provided by the Lagos State government admitted that there was a shooting and certain persons died. So you see that, cat and dog relationship between youths and security agencies. You see security agencies harassing youths. For instance, the SAS unit of the police force that even led to the protest, where if a youth is looking one kind, if his hair is looking one kind, they begin to profile him, search his phones, look at his private messages and all of that, profile him, begin to give him negative tags here and there and all of that. And the youth in return also are also hostile to security agencies and all of that. So that is, this is supposed to be a summary of the influence map, which I've just explained. Then the linkage, the actual linkage between cultism and structural youth, violence. This is something that I just wrote down using the Niger Delta as a case study. But in my work, my field experience, my classroom experience, and all of that, I've come to realize that when there is a failure of governance, that responsibility of government, whether you like it or not, certain groups that are supposed to benefit from that service that government is supposed to offer, that government has failed to offer, those groups must look for other duty bearers where they will shift the responsibility to. And where those responsibilities, those services are not offered, there will be violence. The Niger Delta case is a very, very good case study. In our communities, because there is an absolute failure of governance, you notice that communities now shifted the responsibility of government to oil companies operating in the Niger Delta. In fact, if you go to an average Niger Delta community and you open a business center, I tell you, the community expect that with that business center, you should construct their road for them. The community expect that with that business center, you should give them lights. You should give them borehole, and all of that. That is not your responsibility because you are paying tax. It is the responsibility of government. But because government has failed in that direction, you see communities, you see youths now transferring that responsibility to other duty bearers. And where there is failure, naturally, what you see is violence. The Niger Delta case is a very good case study because when these responsibilities were shifted to IOCs, international oil companies, some IOCs responded by giving money to these youth groups and all of that. Now, when money became involved and you started saying money, that money brought conflict between them. Then they factionalized themselves, and from factionalizing themselves, the element of cultism came in, the fight for oil wells came in, and all of that, and so forth. We can go on and on. But look at these types of structural violence that keeps promoting cultism in our schools and communities here in Nigeria. Number one, you have state-sponsored violence. Now you can ask, how is the state sponsoring violence in our schools? Look at it, inadequate funding for the educational sector. I was looking at the 2021 budget. I was looking at the provision for education in the 2021 budget. And I noticed that 5.6% only is what is allocated to the educational sector. And that 5.6% ranks as the lowest allocation to the educational sector in the last 10 years, the lowest, So in an era where ASU keeps going on strike, we keep having brain drain within the sector, research facilities are decaying. In fact, there is a near absence of research facilities, lack of teaching aids here and there. Because of that, parents are busy pushing their children to countries like Indonesia, to countries like Pakistan, countries like even neighboring the Niger Republic. I used to have a youth in my church that his parents sent him to Niger Republic to go and study, go and do a university study. And they even paid more than what they should have paid if he has to study in a Nigerian university. You can imagine how we are falling. And yet government is giving 5.6% to that sector. So it's a challenge. So when the sector is not doing well, you should expect that naturally the students will also not do well. And maybe from there they become dropouts, or they manage to graduate, start sorting their way, to lecturers and all of that. It has an implication in terms of motivation to begin to join, things that ordinarily they are not supposed to join, that at least should help them graduate and all of that. Then the quota system. Of course, you and I know the quota system challenge in this country, where in certain part of the country, if you score JAMB 100 or 80, you are given admission. Yet in certain part of the country, if you score 200, you can't even get admission to study certain programs. And they disaggregated states into educationally less privileged states and educationally privileged states. I was looking at the recent one, and Bayelsa is part of the educationally less privileged state. In fact, River State until recently, River State was on that list, and I was laughing. A state that has how many universities? Bayelsa that has how many universities? You are still saying they are educationally less privileged. Why? Because some people in those states have also seen that they are being cheated. So they fought it and said, we too were educationally less privileged. So meaning that if our children score 80 for JAMB, give them admission. Not knowing that indirectly, you are undoing your children, you are undoing yourself, because quota system brings about people who have no business to be in our universities, and you give them admission and they come into the university, and because they don't have a business of being there, they engage themselves in groups like cultism, doing all manner of things, because in the first place, they have no business being there. So quota system as a structural violence is contributing to cultism. Then the lack of educational reforms to meet current international realities. I'm going to talk about this when we talk about the colonial variants in our educational system. So because of time, so let's leave it, since we're still going to talk about it. Inadequate teaching and learning infrastructure. Do you know that in many universities, master students, I won't mention the university, I was in a university recently where I and Hussein, if you're here, Philip Kalio. Me and Philip Kalio were asked to go and teach some PhD students on some of these conflict teams, coming from our field background, In fact, they were the ones that organized the class, because according to them, all they kept learning is theory. So we went there to teach them. And before we started the class, I heard them arguing over money that they contributed for 5 air conditioners. The only 2 air conditioners were installed in the classroom, and they were arguing. Then suddenly, I now remember the conversation I also had in another university where I was with some people. I won't mention the name of the school because 1 or 2 persons from that group is here too. Also discussing a similar thing. In fact, this particular university, where these PhD students were arguing this thing, they got to a point that we have one of them who is now a lawmaker. He's a lawmaker. He's a member of House of Representatives who took it upon himself and said that he's going to take up the matter and all, and all of that. Now, where there is adequate teaching and learning infrastructure, students don't need to contribute to begin to buy AC, buy blackboard, or buy a projector, and all, because I heard all those things that day too. How they bought projector about 4 years ago, how till today they don't know where the projector is and all, and all of that. Then the brain drain, of course, lecturers jumping out every day, students, parents pushing out their children every day. Then the almighty university autonomy that has become a constant source of conflict between ASU and federal government. Then beyond state violence, there is also the administrative violence. This administrative violence is between the students and the university administrators. Somebody's mic is on. Can you please mute your mic?
Having done that, it's expected.
So, Niyi, please help me and then mute. Okay. So, administrative violence, such as incessant strike, ASU, I read the report yesterday where ASU was telling federal government that federal government will hear from them after the expiration of their ultimatum and all of that. That is a call for a new strike and all of that. So when you embark on this strike like that, the students become idle. And because they're idle, our traditional saying that the idle mind is the devil's workshop. Then ASU strike will not lead to uncertain academic calendar. You graduate, I spent 6 years doing a first degree that is supposed to be 4 years. In fact, not just 6 years and some months because of ASU strike, then the absence of solution-based research programs. I'm also going to touch on this when I talk about the colonial variant, the dysfunctional administrative services. When I traveled to Makerere University to do my program, I applied for transcript online. I applied for transcript to my university online. Online, I was told that I will get it in 2 weeks. Don't laugh. Waited for 2 weeks, I didn't get it. Waited for additional 2 weeks, I didn't get it. Then I went to the university myself to demand for the transcript, and they said they couldn't trace my payment. And I showed them the receipt that was generated online, and they said, "Oh, you paid online, you shouldn't have paid. That thing is not working." So if it's not working, where did the money enter? And the lady said, "We have told them to shut down this thing. They still left it like this. They still left it like this. Now, fine, you have told them to shut it down, but my money entered somewhere. Where did my money enter?" So I now have to apply afresh again for a transcript manually, And that transcript that should have come, within 14 days, came after 2 months. Students have missed scholarships like that. Students have missed programs like that. Students have missed fellowships like that. Students have missed opportunities like that. So if you know that you'll be needing transcript in the next 6 months, my advice is you begin to apply from now. Then the politicization of student politics and all of that. Now, vice chancellors are interested in who becomes the SUG president. Cult groups are also interested in who becomes the SUG president. So whoever that must win must get the blessing of the vice chancellor, and at the same time also get the blessing of the leaders of the cult groups on campus. So once you secure these blessings, you are sure that you're going to win. Then the colonial violence. I didn't bother to write anything down because we can discuss this for the next 24 hours. We won't exhaust. But because of time, I'll just summarize by letting us know that it is high time, we take a look at our educational curriculum again, because there are still some elements of, colonial violence planted in our curriculum. Of course, our curriculum today, even though we keep reviewing or we keep talking about reviewing and whatever, was handed over to us by the colonial masters. Have you asked yourself why our university graduates are still roaming the streets looking for jobs instead of creating jobs? When you study abroad, when you study in Europe, study in Asia, the average graduate is an innovator, is an entrepreneur. He creates jobs. He doesn't look for jobs. He doesn't look for jobs. Every day when you watch CNN, you see the job, you see that today, for this month, US has added new jobs. The following month, US has added new jobs. That's what you keep seeing. That's what you keep seeing. That is post-COVID, recovery from COVID. So they are adding new jobs. But in Nigeria, what you see is job loss. Every year, job loss. Every year, job loss. What is happening? The difference is while the universities are churning out graduates that are creating jobs, our universities are churning out graduates that are looking for jobs. Are you seeing the irony? So that is why, at the end of the day, he graduates, he roams the streets with file, looking for a job. When he gets the government job, they now call him civil servant. Civil servant. Where did we even get that term, servant? Does it not tell you something about a colonial variant? Civil servant. Why can't we say staff, government staff? Why can't we drop the word civil servant? Why? Because he was trained for 4 years to become a servant by the time he graduates. So we can go on and on to discuss this, colonial, violence. And that is why today, our dream is to travel out of the country. Once Canada do free visa now, I assure you, 80% of our youth will leave this country. Canada just do free visa. You see you will see the confusion that will happen in this country. Why do you think that youths are still risking their lives, traveling to Libya just to cross to Italy, traveling to Morocco just to cross to Spain? They risk their life to cross the Mediterranean Sea. They are drowning in the seas. In Libya, they are capturing them as slaves and selling them to armed groups in the Sahel region to fight as soldiers. Yet some of them are captured and used as sex slaves. Yet every day you still have youths in groups looking for opportunities to run with all this risk. That should let you know that there is a serious disruption in our social fabric. That is the lack of social cohesion in this country. And it is high time as practitioners, as professionals, we rise up and begin to lend our voice so that policymakers will begin to do things differently. Then the social violence, of course, poverty. Nigeria is, since 2018, Nigeria has been the poverty capital of the world, according to the World Poverty Clock. Nigeria overtook India since 2018. And because the position is so enviable and so sweet, we have refused to relinquish that position to any other country. So we are still the poverty capital of the world. And I was reading the NLSS report, the Nigerian Living Standard Survey report, which was adopted by the NBS, the National Bureau of Statistics, including the World Bank, adopted it, which was released. They projected that in 2020, not less than 90 million Nigerians will fall below the poverty line. And what is the poverty line? The poverty line in their calculation is 48% of Nigerians cannot make an average of 137,000 naira a year. 48% of Nigerians, 137,000 naira a year, not a day, a year. So I now broke it down, 137,000 naira times 366 days. It means that we have Nigerians who don't live above 374 naira a day. So it means their breakfast, their lunch, their dinner, whether they will pay school fees, whether they will pay house rent, everything, they don't earn more than 374 naira a day. So now you can understand the stark reality facing us and that we have a problem. Unemployment, of course, then the militarized. I was discussing with somebody yesterday, and I told her that when I returned, when I resumed, I noticed that a particular, public administrator, senior school administrator, who has finished serving his tenure, was coming to the faculty building in his own office with military men, with guns. They were entering the faculty building with guns, and I was screaming within my mind that what kind of thing is this? Because I know that military people are not permitted to enter the campus with arms, except where there is a serious unrest. I know that. But even entering a faculty people with guns, do you know what that is doing to their psyche? So we are militarized. The average Nigerian is militarized. That is when when we are driving, we're always in a hurry. We want to go first. We always want to circumvent the line, even when we stand before the ATM. It is not our fault. We have been militarized over the years. Then the police violence, which I earlier, explained. So I'll just round it up by giving this, recommendation. Number one, it is important that policymakers should begin to look at the 5 fundamental lines of transformation. And what are those fundamental lines of transformation? Education. If you want to transform a man, give him education. Then give him a job. So that when he has education, he has a job, he will have a new lifestyle. When he has a new lifestyle, it will now begin to impact on his family lines. When family lines are impacted, well, you now begin to see that generally the country, the well-being of the country, would be okay. Then there is need for structural peace education beginning from the primary to secondary to tertiary level of our institutions of learning. Then there is also a need to counter conflict incentives. I explained the conflict incentives when we're looking at the conflict tree. And what are the conflict incentives? Some of the conflict incentives I mentioned, like political patronage, contracts, here and there, and all of that. In a particular state, a known cult leader was made the chief security officer in the state. So the other leaders of the cult groups became angry and came together and caused serious unrest in the state. Because to them, by their estimation, he is junior to them and all of that. These are conflict incentives. So when youths begin to see this as role models, they go into cultism. But how do we counter these conflict incentives? We can counter them with low-hanging fruits. What are the low-hanging fruits? If you see a responsible youth, give him scholarship. Tell him that I'm giving you this scholarship because you are responsible. If you see a responsible youth looking for a job, give him job. Tell him that I'm giving you this job because you are responsible. Do you know why Nigerians don't like to fight for their country? If you ask an average Nigerian, where are you from? Instead of telling you he's a Nigerian, he will tell you, I'm from Niger, I'm from Yoruba, I'm from Morocco. Why? Because the country does not have any low-hanging fruit for him. I was somewhere, and somebody was telling me his story. And what is his story? They were on the queue traveling. I think they were going to France or Netherlands also. The queue was so long. They were just there. And all of a sudden, there was an announcement by immigration officials. What is the announcement? If you are a US citizen, come this way. The rest, remain where you are. But if you are a US citizen, come this way. And certain persons who were on the queue didn't like it. And they challenged immigration authority. Why? What kind of segregation? Why would you do that? And they explained to them that naturally US citizens, the US as a country don't like to keep their citizens through long delays at the airport. So a Nigerian lady, a Yoruba woman, just joined that line of US citizens. And when they checked the passport, they told her, you are not a US citizen. She said, no, my child, the child I'm carrying is a US citizen. Look at his passport. And because of that passport of the child, they allowed the woman. You can see that what her own passport cannot give her, the passport of her child, who is a US citizen, gave her. Tell me, if that child grows up, will he not defend US? He will defend US. He will be proud to show the US flag, to carry the US flag. Are you proud to even carry Nigerian flag? So these are the low-hanging fruit we can use to counter these, conflict incentives. Then institutions that transmit generational trauma. Even right now in our communities, we still have the scare of what violence has done to us. And because we have not dismantled those institutions, our youths continue to look up to those institutions and continue to move into the cycle of violence. Because when they look at those institutions, the institutions are also showing them the benefits of being violent. They continue to enlist in violent circles and all of that. Then it is also important to raise positive role models to serve as community influencers. Then multi-layer community peace architecture dialogue, even across schools. One of the activities that this project wants to do is to form peace clubs across schools. So I've taken so much time, but I will stop here so that there are questions and so that we also have conversations around it, and they will bring the session to a close. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very, 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 very good presentation, which has opened our eyes to see so many things, the underlying factors that triggers cultism. We saw lack of social cohesion in our country. We saw that there are some incentives that also encourages acts of cultism. We saw the failure of duty bearers. We could also see that there is transformation of cultism from the school into the streets. We also saw the relationship between all these drivers and how they trigger cultism in our schools. And we also have a couple of recommendations towards addressing these issues. We're very glad to have that presentation, and I hope all of us are also very glad. Right now, we want to have discussions around this presentation and also recommendations in response to this presentation. If we have anyone who wants to make inputs, the floor is open. The floor is open. Okay, Mr. Ayowe, you have the floor.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Ayowe.
Yes, I really appreciate this.
It's Chief Ayowe, not Mr. Ayowe. Yes. Chief Ayowe.
Well, thank you very much. In fact, it has been an ongoing concern. The issue of cultism and every other issue that affects our social well-being. And I have been bothered because often we look at shortcuts to resolving these issues. But the way it stands now, I think it is more complicated. In fact, the fundamental issue on ground is the issue of incentives. Violence is a very, how do I put it, is a very important commodity now. That is in the sense that when one has the means of violence, the person becomes a resource that is sought for so that the person can be used to achieve other people's objectives. So I think what we need to do is to start the process from the family background. I think the major issue is the family background. The household, that is, family should take proper responsibility. What we do these days from year 3 now, you discover that the parents are no longer having full control of children again. They go to nursery school. And from there, you have the issue of people trying to inculcate wrong ideas. You may not know directly or indirectly. So I think where we need to start from is to try as much as possible to educate the family setting so that we'll take full responsibility. Because the fact is, the church, the government cannot do for the youth or anybody what the family is supposed to do. It is the place where obedience and understanding and conduct is learned. So if that idea is not inculcated into child early enough, it becomes a problem to society. And in this environment where it's so incentivized that you can do this and you go, and we have the examples. Cultists becoming House of Assembly members, cultists becoming so rich, cultists becoming so important, it can go on and on. So this incentive is the issue. And so while those in governance will continue to do that to achieve the objective, then from the household, we need to try as much as possible to educate ourselves so that we begin to turn the tide around from that. And it might take a very long time. And I think that is one of it. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you very much, Chief Ayowe. We appreciate that contribution.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, is there any other one who has who wants to make contributions? Do we have anyone again who wants to make contributions to this discussion? Or
Me, I think I think there is a question.
Okay.
Platform. There's a question.
Okay.
Or I think this is a direct message to me from my friend Thomas Itole of Zimbabwe. He's asking me, how does the biggest economy on the African continent become the poverty capital of the world? That's an irony of sorts. Wow. Is there a link between poverty and cultism? Wow, this is a very, very massive question. And Thomas Itole, I know that you're also familiar with the Nigerian context, because both of us, we had argued this when we are out of the country. But the truth of the matter is that the challenge with Nigeria is not a challenge of lack of resources. It's a challenge of properly harnessing these resources and channeling them to the well-being, to the development and well-being of the people. So, and that is why a lot of us, most oftentimes when we speak, we always narrow down the challenge to leadership. Leadership. Because if leadership is right, even a bad situation can be transformed. But if leadership is not right, no matter how good the situation is on ground, it cannot work. So our challenge, like I said, is not a lack of resources. It's a lack of, properly, the power to properly harness these resources. Now, the second part of your question is if there is a link between poverty and cultism. There is a very, very serious link, and I thought I addressed it in my presentation, except that maybe I just did it passively. There is a link because, and it has also a link to the conflict incentives that Chief Ayowe just talked about, where a youth who can hardly feed himself and a cultist begins to dangle or flaunt, his wealth that probably he has made from government patronage, wealth that probably he has made from kidnapping and all manner of things. I told you that cultism shares a nexus with all these other crimes, So where a cultist begins to flaunt, some of these things he has acquired, of course, that youth who is unemployed, who does not have money to also get for himself those things, can be lured to join cultism. And that is what is happening today in most communities, where you see the conflict entrepreneurs, non-conflict entrepreneurs, providing social services like water. We have instances where in some communities, there is absence of, the communities are not connected to national grid. So the source of power they have in those communities comes from a community generator donated by a non-conflict entrepreneur, a non-cultist. And every 7 p.m., they switch on the gen, 6 a.m., they switch off the gen. The community entrepreneur donated the community generator and is responsible for fueling the generator, So when you begin to see certain, things, the impression is that conflict pays. And because naturally the people cannot provide for themselves, they are, lured into joining. So there is a very, very strong link. As a matter of fact, unemployment is also a serious, serious challenge. And you know that where there is lack of employment, of course, there will be poverty. And where there is poverty, people will take to crime, just to keep body and soul together. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sonny. I just like we engage discussions before the start of this roundtable. I pointed out that good governance has a very big role to play if we must play down all the social issues in our society. It's important that we engage some of these policy issues, because if we don't address them from the policy angle, we won't be able to nip them on the board. So it's important we address all these issues of good governance, because when you have good governance, everything will fall in place. Good governance will entrench good leadership. It will entrench good practices. And when we also decide not to favor, when we decide to favor hard work and competence, things will start to change. Next on our agenda is to have a next steps. This session shall include next line of action to be taken as parts of the objective of the social change initiative? What are the next line of actions that we feel?
Sorry, Ni, if I may comment.
Okay.
Sorry, Ni, if I may comment. Can we just quickly take our photograph?
Okay, can we all
I see people entering and going out.
Yes, let's open our video, please. Let's open our video, please.
Thomas Itole, the bishop.
Oh, before we take the picture, maybe after the pictures, we'll take goodwill message from the Makerere Rotary Peace Center, because we missed Thomas Itole's presentation. Can we do that after the pictures, please?
Okay.
Sonny, to do this screenshot, is it Windows and print screen?
Yes.
Okay, so we can just do it from your end. I also do it from my end there. Can we have all our videos?
Okay.
Can we have all our videos open, please? Still waiting for Deborah Kauna, Raymond Genesis, Stella Hilbuzo, Shegun Precious, Otran Makri to open their videos so we can take this photograph.
I think we have appreciable number. We can take it.
No, we have just only 3 persons there. Even you, your video is not opened.
It is.
Mine?
Sonny,
it's opening and closing.
Okay. Okay, Miss.
I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm seeing 6 videos here.
Okay, I could also see 6 too.
Okay, I think because of time, I think we can just take.
All right, I think I've taken a couple of them. Can we have Thomas Itole present a goodwill message on behalf of Makerere Rotary Peace Center? Is Thomas still in the house?
Okay, are we closing now? Because I'm sorry, I wanted to say something after the presentation by Sonny.
All right.
Okay.
Do I have the floor now?
Yes, you have the floor. You have the floor, Hussein.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about one of the very popular recommendations for dealing with cultism in Nigeria, which has been making laws that bans, that prescribes cultism and so I when I worked in Delta State had a law like that. Yeah. But when doing our dialogues with the law enforcement agents, they likened the challenge with prosecuting people for cultism with the challenge that we are now facing with drug abuse. Now, drug abuse, a lot of young people now use substances that are not banned to get high. For instance, you put Tom in Tom Sweet in La Casera, it becomes a drug, and you cannot really arrest someone for carrying Tom or carrying La Casera. So now the challenge that had is that because when they say when the hunters begin without missing, the birds begin to fly without perching. So now, how do you prove that somebody is a member of a cult? Will you have access to their register? How will you prove that? Because if the person has a good, he's good scot-free. So maybe if the person is involved in a particular crime, or maybe you catch him with maybe with drugs, or you catch him with firearms, then you can charge him for carrying firearms. If the person commits murder or molests someone, you can charge him for that. But charging someone for cultism or prosecuting someone for cultism is a very difficult task. And so I think especially for scholars and people in development, I think we really need to come up with a sustainable way, you understand, of making that any laws against cultism can actually work. That's just a contribution I wanted to drop. Because like in Delta State with that law, they still have, I think, the highest frequency of cult violence in the region, even though they have an anti-cult law in place. So that
I agree with you, Sin. I agree, because even in River State, we also have, in fact, the law we have in River State is so strict that it prescribes death penalty, life imprisonment if you are arrested as a cultist, death penalty if your activities as a cultist leads to the death of somebody. Two types of, so very strict, and yet we still have these challenges, as you say, as pointed out. But I think it's a discussion that we'll continue to have.
I don't know how many people have they successfully prosecuted for cultism in River State? There's none in Delta.
None on record. None on record.
So that's the challenge. So we really have to look at if we are going to toe that line of part of the solution, then we really have properly, I'm sure it works, and not just an action without results.
Yeah.
Well, hello.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear me, Mr. Nee?
Yes,
I can hear you.
Yes, it's Javan Binam speaking.
Okay, Javan.
Yes. Yes, Javan. Hello.
You have the floor, Javan. You can make your presentation. You can just speak to
us. Yes. Actually, I want to thank everyone. And yesterday I was invited by my boss, Mr. Soni Dada. And though there are two of my boss here, Mr. Soni and Mr. Olani. Yes, as part of solution, as part of ways that we can help, just like other speakers have said, we can help in eradicating, the involvement in cultism activities in our schools. I think apart from enactment of the laws, like we said, other ways should be through awareness creation about the danger of cultism. Since we are talking about, our schools, creation of, awareness about the danger of this cultism, as well as inculcation of right attitude and values to students, it will equally help, in eradicating the involvement of our pupils, students, into a cult group, We can equally do that by encouraging the youth or students to be good citizens. This is another way that can help, as well as assisting students to reject being lured into cultism, as well as encouraging them to expose the activities and mode of operation of various cult groups. Yes, these are some of the ways. And through encouragement.
Thank you, Javan. Your point is well noted.
Yes. So I think this will go along. That is apart from enactment of laws and the rest, because we are dealing with perhaps, school children here. So I think encouraging students to be more focused to achieve future goals and have a positive place in history rather than joining cultism, cultist group. All this will help, as part of recommendations.
Javan, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I know that you came in a bit late, but I know that Nee laid the foundation when he was talking about the focus of the SCI, the Social Change Initiative. And part of the in-person activities we are going to have is also include peace campaigns across secondary schools and formation of peace clubs. And what all you have just described is exactly the focus that we'll be doing under those activities, peace campaigns. Then we also intend to train young peace ambassadors. So all of the issues you have mentioned, all of them fall under this in-person activity. Thank you for bringing them, for highlighting.
Thank you so much.
Them.
Thank you.
All right, Sonny. Will it be in place for us to have a very short discussion on going forward with this discussion through a WhatsApp platform, like we said earlier?
I think that is not a bad idea. That is okay. The next steps, you already listed them in your opening. Next steps will be that, because we're going to have more of these conversations online, then as we move on, we're also going to have the in-person activities. These are the next steps. But the most important thing is that stakeholders will be carried along in each of these steps. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we have Thomas Itole briefly? Thomas, can we have you for your goodwill message on behalf of Makerere Rotary Police Center?
Thank you very much, Sonny, and everyone who made this opportunity possible. I hope you are hearing me from the other end. You know, the challenge we have nowadays with meetings online is that one can talk for hours on end without the audience hearing them. So let me confirm whether or not you are hearing me.
Of course, we can hear you.
We can all hear you.
Thank you very much. Yes. On behalf of Makerere University Peace Center, let me thank the organizers of today's session who made this possible. We had very fruitful conversations on a topic that is very close to the heart of Makerere Peace Center and also to my own heart. And let me also take this opportunity to thank my friend, Zoni Doda, who delivered very well an in-depth analysis, very comprehensive on a challenge that I think is something we need to look at as a continent. Let me share with you that this is not only a challenge that is in Nigeria, but we are increasingly seeing this challenge across the continent. Right now, Mozambique, we're facing challenges. South Africa, I think we've been seeing what has been happening in my very own country, Zimbabwe as well. We're experiencing different forms of youth violence, different forms of cultism. And today's conversation obviously is going to spearhead and ignite more conversations of this nature. I'm very happy on behalf of Makerere that we are tackling something that needs to be tackled as a continent. And I'm reminded by Martin Luther King, who says, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And I'm excited that this afternoon, we've been reminded once more by Sonny that yes, let's look at the issues that are very key to the development of our communities, to the development of our societies, but also looking at the youth who are supposed, by the way, to be our greatest resource on the continent. If Africa is to turn the corner, if Africa is to experience a turnaround, a change of her fortunes for the better, our youth can definitely not be left behind. But given the challenges that we're experiencing, and obviously the way Sonny unpacked these, I'm very excited that we need to have these very serious conversations about the role of our institutions, the role of our governments, the role of other policy-making bodies, so that we don't lose out on this very important resource that is our youth. These challenges of today can be tackled if we come together as men and women and try to put our heads together, try to put solutions on the table. And I'm also reminded by Mead, who says, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. This afternoon, the few of us who were on this Zoom meeting can definitely begin a movement across the continent that tackles some of the challenges of our time. And I'm very excited that Sonida, the social initiative, speaks to the very heart of what is key to the development of Africa when we look at peace, security, national unity, national cohesion. We can only do so if we play our part individually, and each and every one of us comes to the table and offers a solution, because the solution really lies with all of us, and it begins with me and it begins with you. I would like to thank you, Sonidada, for reminding us once more that indeed we need to tackle challenges experienced and faced by our youth today, and cultism is one challenge that we cannot ignore. And I have to end this by lamenting that it is indeed a pity that our biggest economy is this poverty capital of the world. And you know what that means? We look up to Nigeria as our big brother to lead us in some of the challenges of our time. And let's begin this movement of tackling this scourge of youth violence, youth cultism, the conversations that we've had today, the policy recommendations that were shared on this platform should definitely reach those quarters that matter the most. And I hope when we meet next time, we'll be having a conversation on where we are in terms of tackling those challenges. In those few words, I'm very excited, happy to be here. And my Kerere Peace Center is fully behind this social change initiative. And we are very excited by the work that Mr. Sonidada is doing in Nigeria. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Thank you very much, everyone. We are running out of time. We've done so much. We have discussions have gone round and round. And we have put down a number of recommendations, which every one of us have put together as input. And I want to appreciate everyone on behalf of the Rotary Peace Fellows, on behalf of Rotary International and Rotary Peace Center at Makerere University. I want to appreciate you all for being a part of this discussion. And we hope to see you very, very soon. Sonny, do you have any words for closing?
Yes, I just want to thank all of us for our time. Like I said earlier, I know we're very busy. The fact that we decided to hang out together this afternoon is an indication to show that you too, you are interested in the peace and well-being of our country, and more importantly, our communities. I want to plead with you that within your sphere, you should continue the work, and you should also continue to support anything that will lead to social cohesion of our communities and our country. I just want to encourage you not to lose hope, because we have a lot of conflict challenges in the country, and it looks like things are deteriorating. But if all of us can do our bits, I'm sure we can salvage what is left of our country, especially our children. And to parents that are here, please put your eyes on your children. By virtue of my work, I also do one or two things within the university community. So I also interact with students. I also see a number of things, that also points to the fact that parents are also not doing enough, or parents also have a share of blame in the decadence we're facing. So please, let's try our best. Thank you once again. I appreciate your comment, and please, anytime we come knocking, kindly oblige us with your presence. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.